Good afternoon, everybody, and it's a privilege to be here today. Thanks for coming out. It's a great turnout today. As you can see, that I am not Chairman Keith Gillespie. Chairman Gillespie is a little under the weather today, so he asked that working down the chain of command as secretary, I'm filling in for him today. So I'm Representative Tornecker. I represent parts of Adams and Cumberland County, kind of towards the other side of the state, and it's a privilege. It's a privilege and an honor to be here today to talk about these issues. And I really appreciate the turnout today. This is a great opportunity. And Representative Bud Cook, thanks for having us here. And we'll kick things off here and get right into it. So before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to the minority chair here, Mr. Bill Courts, and go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As he said, my name is Bill Courts. I'm the state representative from the 38th District here in Allegheny County, and I'm also the minority chair of the committee. And I'd like to thank Chairman Keith Gillespie for bringing this hearing down here, because it's a very important issue to talk about. Being an avid hunter myself, I understand the passion of this subject, and I respect the opinions on both sides. So I'm looking forward to the testimony this evening. But before I go any further, I would like to recognize a couple of my old colleagues that are here. Former Representative Dave Levdansky, who was the chair of the Finance Committees here, and also former Representative Rick Saccone's here. Rick, thank you for coming also with your lovely wife. But as I said, this is a very important subject, and I'm glad Representative Cook wanted to do this now. It's a very, very appropriate time to do it. And as I've already stated, it is a very passionate subject, so I understand that and I respect the opinions of all sides. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman, so the members can introduce themselves.
Certainly, and I don't think it'd be appropriate if we didn't let Representative Cook introduce himself and welcome us to his district. So, Representative Cook.
From the 49th District, parts of Fayette, Washington County, the Mon Valley, State Representative Bud Cook, I want to welcome you all for being here. This is indeed a very passionate subject, very important to us. I like to let people know we have approximately 19 sportsmen's clubs in the district alone. Monday hunting in the past has been the state holiday every year, right after Thanksgiving. It's just amazing the impact and the passion that's out there. Emails for me have been running about 50-50 the last 2 weeks. Personally, I'm a traditionalist. I grew up in the woods. Monday was always the day. So during the Sunday hunting debate, we had an amendment on the table regarding moving the start date back. We pulled that back in order to get the Sunday hunting bill across the line, but we did want to have this conversation. And I appreciate everybody being out there today. We appreciate your passion. We're trying to get our arms around where do we go with it. One of the other hats that I wear is the Secretary of the Travel and Tourism Committee in Harrisburg. The change of the date had an impact on travel and tourism up north. So it had a little bit more impact than just the outdoors part. So welcome to the 49th District, folks. We hope you'll come back. It's a great place to live, visit, and work.
Thank you, Representative Cook, and thanks for hosting. It's a lovely facility, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about this issue. At this time, I'd like to kind of work down the line here and have everybody introduce themselves. Well, Representative Gleim, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Representative Gleim from Cumberland County, the 199th District.
Representative Dave Maloney from Berks County.
State Rep Bob Mirsky, 2nd Legislative District, Erie County.
And Representative Anita Kulik, 45th Legislative District, Allegheny County, West Hills.
Great. Well, without further ado, why don't we get into this? And we're going to have 3 speakers today. We'll call you up one at a time, and let's start off with Mr. Randy Santucci, Southwest Regional Director of the Unified Sportsmen of Pennsylvania. Thanks for being here.
First, I'd like to thank Chairman Gillespie for the opportunity here, Representative Courts, Representative Cook, and the other legislators that made the time to come here. Really appreciate it. Tonight I'm here representing the vast number of hunters, camp owners, and businesses that remain opposed to the Saturday deer opener and have suffered adverse impacts as a result of the change. The Pennsylvania Game Commission's decision to move the opening day from Monday to the first Saturday after Thanksgiving was ill-conceived, unsubstantiated, damaged the sport and tradition, produced direct and indirect harm to the multitude of businesses that depend on that revenue generated by hunters. Furthermore, contrary to claims by the Game Commission, the Saturday opener did not increase hunting license for targeted groups in any magnitude remotely comparable to the detriments it caused, and I will provide evidence to that effect. I'm a 60-year-old hunter in Pennsylvania. I served as president of the Unified Sportsmen, a statewide sportsmen's organization, current member of 3 local sportsmen's clubs, as well as former member of the Governor's Advisory Council under Governor Corbett for hunting, fishing, and conservation. Changing the over half-century structure this weekend was a non-issue. Hunters never sought a change to the opening day, and the idea never surfaced until one PGC commissioner, Jim Daly, floated this idea late 2018. Since his initial support, Mr. Daly, upon learning the entirety of the benefits connected to the Monday opener, as well as hunter opposition, he reversed his position. He later resigned from the board when other board members would not recognize the unanimous strong opinion opposition data presented to the board. He stated hurting one group to benefit another is never a good idea. He was completely correct, and today he is outspoken to go back to the Monday opener. Commissioner discussion ensued at the December 2018 working group meeting, which displayed a lack of not only understanding about certain segments of Pennsylvania hunters, but also a flagrant disregard and irrelevancy for our core of aging hunters. When the PGC 27 statewide hunter survey results revealed a 65% hunter opposition to changing the Monday opener, these results were pointedly dismissed by the board, and I quote, "This is just the old guys." Not just an age discriminatory remark, but troubling knowing the median age of our hunters in Pennsylvania today is nearly 52 years old. As a Pennsylvania hunting license buyer for 48 consecutive years, I personally did not appreciate my opinion being rudely dismissed. Camp owners and hunters, there was a disdain that seemed to emerge then towards camp owners and camp hunters. A lack of understanding about this large segment of Pennsylvania hunters was revealed with comments like, "Come on, give me a break. What does it take to open up a camp? Unlock the door and turn on the lights." Commissioner Foradora stated, "Hunters just want to get to camp Saturday to sit around and party." The needs and traditions of camp hunters were totally misrepresented. The drinking comment was beyond the pale and insulted every serious hunter. Hunters have fought that stereotype for decades. It's bad enough we endure these types of insults from non-hunters. Hearing them from agency board members is a true slap in the face. My mentioning these circumstances are not from a malicious intent, but to reveal to legislators how badly the Saturday open decision process was handled. I can forward the link to this meeting to any legislator that cares to see this troubling board discussion. The January 2019 quarterly commissioners meeting followed. The board voted unanimously 8-0 to change the most popular opening day season structure of the most hunted Pennsylvania game animal, the white-tailed deer. Deer hunting influences 90% of Pennsylvania hunting license sales. Hunting drives well over $100 million in state and local tax revenue. It contributes to tens of thousands of jobs and provided revenue for thousands of Pennsylvania businesses. You would think a state agency would have done a regulatory impact analysis on a change affecting so much and so many. The balance of my testimony identifies the results from this haphazard decision-making. The next formal meeting of the Board of Commissioners was in March 2019. The staff members, Dr. Jagno, and she was a human dimension specialist, and Derek Stoner, hunting outreach specialist, presented survey science data to the board boasting a 95% confidence level. Categories like returning lapsed hunters with the Saturday opener, identifying the primary reason for hunters lapsing, and college-age student preferences were topics researched. These board assumptions were deemed unlikely to completely refuted from these staff specialists. Hunter opposition rolled in. Approximately 1,300 hunters contacted the agency. 81% of those contacts opposed changing the opening day. Seeing the hunter opposition and staff data ignored by the board, which are several of the guidelines commissioners are remanded to follow by their policy manual, and experiencing contacts with hundreds of hunters strongly aligned in opposition, I moved forward collecting data. A very telling vote was taken at a meeting being held about CWD at the East Freedom Fire Hall near Altoona, March 9th, 2019. Now, if you look at your packet there are two photos. One is marked number 1, and one is marked number 2. The question was asked, there were approximately 280 guys, hunters there, men and women, mostly men, but some women hunters also. How many here do not want to see the opening day of the deer season changed? Committee members referenced the photo marked with the 1. Now look at the one number 2. That was the inverse of that question, asking who wanted the Saturday opener. I think in that particular circumstance, there's a picture's worth 1,000 words. It was practically unanimous out of 280 hunters that nobody wanted this. Unlike the Board of Commissioners, I understood how the Saturday opener would affect thousands of small businesses in the northern half of our state. I contacted sporting goods stores that sold hunting licenses and related goods. Basically, I was looking for a barometer that would be credible to show how the position the hunters really were, because it was ignored from the board completely. Legislators, I sent the results of this small but telling survey to your offices and to the PGC commissioners. Several of these business owners also claimed neighboring businesses that hunters annually patronized experienced the same situation. And they also identified strong opposition from hunters for changing the opener. And from the business owners, comments like, "I've never heard so much anger over a new change," and "what a mess they made of this," came from these business owners. This survey included Pennsylvania's largest private-owned gun sales store, Grice's Gun Shop, down to small stores like Paul's Trading Post in Kane, Pennsylvania. Collective losses from these 10 sample businesses that weekend exceeded $360,000. The largest one there was obviously Grice's Gun Shop. He was around 206, but the other 9 businesses made up quite a bit themselves at $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 a clip of money they lost that weekend in sales because it just dried up, completely blindsided them. I tried to encompass a broad scope of business sizes in the survey. I also included to you the letter from Senator Scott Hutchinson to the Game Commission identifying the same extreme sales losses in his district. These small businesses already have a tough time competing, and I'm quoting him, "and I'm afraid that this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and they may be forced to shut their doors. In addition, I know of 2 local fire departments whose large weekend fundraising raffles were hit hard by the change up of the opening day." And I implore you to read the senator's letter regarding his district. The economic impact of changing the deer opener was crystal clear to those of us understanding hunter patronage of these businesses throughout this weekend. The Game Commission Board of Commissioners did no research, nor even mention this critical aspect in their decision-making. To this day, there's no concern or recognition of this circumstance. In fact, they're proposing putting a Sunday following the Saturday, which will further hurt these businesses impacted from hunter patronage. Recently, in an article in the York Dispatch, President Charlie Fox, who's now board president, was interviewed, and he commented that his testimony that he had from 10 businesses that he had correspondence, of which, again, that these businesses were most profitable they had that weekend. My testimony from these 10 businesses, and he referred to these businesses that I gave information as claims. And legislators, once again, the PGC dismissing letters from business owners offering to open up their books to substantiate their losses are not claims, they're facts. And this has kind of bothered me that, I made the effort to pull this all in and it just got dismissed as claims. And it was not that. These businesses will open their books to show you the impact from that weekend. May I appeal to your common sense reasoning? Would guiding over 500,000 hunters away from their families and into the woods on this Saturday, Small Business Saturday nonetheless, stimulate business patronage or reduce it? Of course, maybe these hunters were shopping from the cell phones. I have to, these days you never know. But you can see the contemptuous dismissal toward me and the facts presented surrounding this issue. This overlooked economic oversight by the agency seems to have struck a nerve that they had never contemplated what this was going to do. Now, to explain this, this is different depending on what part of the state you're in. And I can try to identify that. The windfall of sales from hunter impulse buying or otherwise that came in this weekend, particularly in small rural businesses, helps carry them through the winter until spring and trout season, when camp hunters and fishermen come out of basically come out of hibernation. Camp and seasonal home communities are mostly ghost towns in this period, but business operating costs remain alive, and this lost revenue is gone and does not come back. Why all this emphasis to bring in some of the college student license sales and inconvenience countless Pennsylvania hunters now needing to juggle family member Thanksgiving visit scenarios and killing needed time for travel, preparation, and tradition for approximately 200,000 camp hunters and hunters statewide for that matter. This attempt to somehow create time by putting in the Saturday did completely the opposite. The traditions and, people procrastinate and leave things to the last minute, and hunters are no different. If you've ever tried to get on a shooting range on that weekend, you can't do it. So hunters at this point realized right after Thanksgiving they had Friday and that was it, and they had to be in the woods the next morning. So the main word, I heard a lot of guys that were even on the fence about this. They didn't like it after the fact because it became too rushed. Everything just got too hectic. The Saturday opener inflicted millions of dollars of losses in rural areas to businesses already stretched thin. Saturday opener opposition stands strong statewide, but I cannot stress strongly enough, just the stimulus of our camp culture brings year-round to a large portion of state's rural economy through taxes, utilities, maintenance, in and around these small rural towns. The Saturday opener will be the last nail in the coffin to some businesses and damaging to our still popular Pennsylvania camp tradition. If you feel the PGC has no responsibility in this decision making it towards the state's economy, license sales reflected minimal interest from the Saturday opener, which I want to address. A recent Game Commission press release was titled, "License Sales Up After the Deer Opener." This claim is misleading at best, intentionally misleading at worst. Let me explain. Annual license sales are a fluctuating entity. Why a hunter chooses to buy a license and decides to lapse is mostly unpredictable and influenced by many factors annually. Please keep this mercurial license sale aspect in mind as I move forward. If you would take the pack stapled together marked number 3 in the top right corner, you'll see a bar graph there that was presented by the Dr. Jagno at the Game Commission meeting in January. If you see the parts that I have marked, you'll see a cyclic circumstance from 83 to 85, dropping 3 years, and 86, an uptake of 0.31. Nearly identically, 10 years later, 93 to 95, a drop in license sales, and in 96, an uptake of 0.48%. Nearly 10 or 11 years later, the same thing. 05 and 07, 3 years of consecutive significant drop of license sales. They went back up 0.56%. And if you look at today, we had 16 to 18, and they were up in 2019, 0.4%. What this is trying to make clear is license sales can correct themselves for no apparent reason at all. So keep that in mind as I move forward with my testimony. When multiple variables are introduced in hunting seasons, it becomes difficult, if not impossible, to claim any single variable's impact or the degree of impact on license sales. Also, from 2008 to 18, these sales increased 5 of the 11 years, 45% of the time. Now, if you notice, 3A is one of the other PowerPoint slides, and if you notice, it was reported that 13 times in 36 years. Stretching it out there, it looked like 36.1%. But more poignantly, if you pull that down to the last 11 years, that increases to 45.4%. So it seems to me, why would you not have picked the most current stage of the license sales? It shows that in the last 11 years, almost half the time they've changed. They went up. So again, it shows that mercurial up and down aspect of license sales. It's relatively unpredictable. This past year, we saw a lot of changes in seasons, tremendous amount of changes. Late archery and flintlock deer seasons were extended by more than a week. We created a new October muzzleloader 7-day bear season that included 2 Saturdays, a new 12-day statewide archery bear season, a new 3-day special firearm season including 1 Saturday, a new September elk and archery season, a new January elk season. The point being made here is there were several factors introduced at the same time as the Saturday opener. So basically, there was a huge interest in results from some of these changes, none of which were influenced likely by the Saturday opener. The 3 new bear seasons were very popular and a huge success and yielded the largest bear harvest in Pennsylvania history. When you combine that aspect with all the season changes likely impacting license sales, combined with truthfully analyzing license sales categories, there's no possible way to trumpet the Saturday opener other than just a minor factor. But the PGC and some outdoor writers are not representing the facts accurately. Remember, the mercurial or incidental aspect of license sales happened in 5 of 11 years. So when you combine that with some of the competition that the Saturday opener had this year, which was unlike any other prior year, particularly the bear season changes, you know, it's a lot of interest that could have stimulated license sales. Now, when you go further into this, resident and non-resident bear licenses increased by a whopping 27,174 licenses. How many of those licenses? Now, those are not part of the general license sales. Those are after the general totals are stood up. These are permits and extra licenses. So you had an interest in by 27,174 more hunters for bear hunting than last year. How much did that stimulate license sales? Resident and non-resident muzzleloaders sales increased by 5,182 over last year. Resident and non-resident archery licenses increased by 6,022 last year. Adult and junior pheasant permit sales were up 3,551 over last year. It would be a stretch to tie any one of these categories to the Saturday opener. These were actual circumstances that happened from changes of seasons and opportunity. So when you look at the total of that, there was 58,551 attributed to general that were not attached to general license sales, but were over and above the sales of these categories last year. So what portion of that stimulated guys to not lapse, to get an interest this year? And I think the one thing here that was really interesting was the elk license sales. You know, they brought in 15 archery license tags this year. There was an interest, 16,622 people applied for those licenses. So again, how much of that stimulated a license sales prior to the season? There was an effort. Now, if I go to the license sales categories, it's kind of interesting because the categories that were targeted by the Saturday opener just didn't happen. 4 junior license sales categories. There's a resident, non-resident, and combo in each one of those. The combined totals of those dropped by 2,613. We stimulated almost no license sales. They dropped. The adult license category also dropped by 4,292 licenses over last year. We didn't stimulate adult license sales. The part now that's very interesting to me, if you look at the number 5 article, I kind of jumped over one thing here too. Let me back up just a step. If you look at number 4, the paper marked number 4 at the top right corner, you see this category. This is the resident senior combo renewal. These are the old fellows renewing their licenses under the combo license sales. If you notice, this category has increased steadily for the past 10 years. And they've increased between approximately 3,000 to 4,000 licenses a year. There's no reason to think that that wasn't going to increase again this year. It's been almost identical for the past 9 or 10 years. So when you take this amount of license sales, 3,769, you take that off of this year's total, the increase in license sales this year is gone. You're in the red. The 0.4 increase now disappears because this category had nothing to do with Saturday opener. So the 0.4% increase that everybody keeps touting is we did something this year, it's gone with this one category. Now, if you look at number 5 presentation, the 2 pages, there were 2 PowerPoints presented at that January meeting. Resident hunters 18 to 34, resident hunters 18 to 21. Now, if you notice the header on those, Saturday opener. Again, we're trying to sell something here that's just not accurate. I'm going to read this entirety here. The 2 attached documents from PGC January 2019 Commissioners Meeting reveal how staff's summation of license sales were intentionally deceptive. Titling these categories from the 18 to 34-year-old and the 18 to 21-year-olds Saturday opener, it's misleading. These categories were the only categories that saw a license increase for younger hunters. Remember, the 4 youth categories were all still behind from last year. The increase over 2018 was so minuscule, there was this effort to spin the sales from the day before and the week before the Saturday opener, the shiny, distracting object. Choosing this dynamic presented a higher percentage of increase rather than identify the paltry total license sales. It was such a small increase, we had to find another way to make it look bigger than what it actually was. Only 1,079 additional licenses were sold to this group. This small increase represented a 0.13%, or about 1/10 of the total sales, and only a 0.56% increase in this category over 2018. Now, if I cut to the chase, you look at the 18 to 30-year-old sales, 1,079 licenses. That was it between the 18 to 34-year-old license group that was increased over last year. If you notice, the 18 to 21-year-old sales is 1,067. They overlap. When you subtract the latter from the former, we only sold 12 more licenses to the 22 to 34-year-old age group statewide. 12 hunting licenses. Now, if you want to understand the significance of that, one of the points that the commissioners made in their meeting was hunters couldn't get off. Young hunters couldn't get off. They don't have vacation. They don't have enough time in to take off. Commissioners speculated the Saturday opener would benefit this 22 to 34-year-old age group. Young hunters with new jobs and less vacation would likely have the most difficulty taking off work for the Monday opener. Did not happen. This result shows once again the Monday opener was and is not an issue. You only sold 12 licenses to that category, would have accurately represented your younger workers. When you go to the, let me find my last page here. If a cost-benefit analysis was done of the Saturday opener proposal prior or post-implementation, it holds no water. The agency jumped over dollars to pick up a few pennies and influenced the Sunday hunting bill. It was a good segue, I believe, the term the commissioners used in their meeting. Undeniably, millions of dollars of revenue across large areas of our state were gone or displaced. Thousands of small to medium businesses need this repaired. The PGC cannot even 100% solidly identify what portion of the poultry license sales increase came from the Saturday opener. What that means is that 1,079 license sales, that increase, we don't know what drove those there. The success of the bear season could have been half of them. So a portion certainly could be claimed by the Saturday opener. But what portion, we don't ever know. So if you look at the total even of that 1,079, that in and itself, to compare that to the damage this did across this state, to traditions, to camp owners, to small businesses, to nonprofit fire departments and churches that used the influx of hunters into these small towns to make money for their nonprofit organizations, was gone. And a matter of fact, I received a letter, and if you see, Senator Hutchinson identifies that in his letter regarding the nonprofits. This came yesterday by the Tidioute Area Volunteer Fire Department, which is up near my camp. I had talked to them months ago. This came through yesterday. The Tidioute Area Volunteer Fire Department has held our largest fundraiser on Saturday after Thanksgiving, a fall gun raffle. This event has raised funds for our operations for the duration of the winter months. There it is again. It's a big hit to these people when they lose these fundraisers. For this fundraiser to be successful, our department depends on the attendance of the area hunters for this event. The recent changes made, opening deer season on Saturday as opposed to Monday, disrupted the natural order of the weekend. Typically, many hunters spend Thanksgiving with their family and head up for the camps on Friday. Friday would consist of opening up camp, getting settled, and gathering supplies. So on a Saturday night in our areas, these hunters would unwind at the fundraiser event with drinks, food, entertainment, and chance of winning one of the prizes. They went on to say here that our fall gun raffle attendance was less than half of what it has been in previous years. So the aspect of this isn't only the small businesses, the medium businesses, it's the nonprofits, our first responders, churches, fire halls. They all took advantage of that influx. So when we look at this thing now, most schools still give off to accommodate for the first deer season. Can we remember, being that the young, and how much to us, that they can reverse this short-sighted thing before we lose that Monday off for the kids too. That was a perception from people outside of our hunting community that hunting was still important. So we lost that too if this doesn't get reversed. But ultimately, what I would like to suggest as a compromise is that we go back to the Monday opener, correct all the problems that the Saturday opener just created, put the Sunday after this first traditional Saturday, the week after the Monday opener, so you can hunt the 13 days through. This corrects everything, basically. And if anybody thinks that this has changed, it hasn't, because here's some recent petitions just ran at the Harrisburg show that the guys put out at our unified booth. and they're running, well, there was an Altoona show, was running 3-1 still opposed, and the Harrisburg show was running 56 opposed to 13 yes. So 4-1 on these petitions to this day. Hunters are still opposed to the change of the Saturday opener. So, but thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I want to take a second here to let Representative Wetling introduce himself.
My name is Park Wentling. I'm a state representative in the 17th Legislative District, which includes parts of Erie, Crawford, Mercer, and Lawrence County. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Great, and we're going to hold questions to the end, so don't go too far. At this time, I'd like to welcome up Mr. Harold Daub, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen and Conservationists. Mr. Daub, whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you. I don't usually move this slow. I injured my back a couple days ago, so. Yeah. Chairman Gillespie, Representative Ecker, Chairman Courts, and members of the committee. I am Harold Daub, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen and Conservationists, the voice of Pennsylvania's conservationists since 1932. Thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts related to conservation, wildlife management, our outdoor heritage, and specifically the Saturday opening day of rifle deer season. The PFSC appreciates any effort that provides additional opportunities for Pennsylvania's hunter conservationists. One of these recent efforts was the move to change the longtime Monday opener to a Saturday opener for the rifle deer season. This move has been controversial and hence why we are here today. Change is often hard and not often easily accepted by Pennsylvanians who cherish our traditions. However, just because we may not be happy with the change, it doesn't mean the change isn't necessary. Like Bud, I have a bit of a quandary here when I survey our membership. When the proposal for a Saturday opener was first introduced last year, 61% of our clubs who responded to our survey opposed the change. However, 70% of our individual members who responded did support the change. When asked why some opposed the change, the general response typically was they referenced tradition. We are now again polling our members on their opinions following the implementation of the Saturday opener. The proposal to keep the Saturday opener and the additional opportunity of adding the coinciding Sunday. So far, the feedback has been mostly positive, and many Pennsylvania hunters are looking forward to having a full weekend of deer hunting opportunity in the upcoming season. Our members have until March 15th, 2020, spring conference to weigh in with their opinions. At that time, all the votes will be tabulated and shared with our board of directors and delegates, and then I will be sharing our position with the Pennsylvania Board of Commissioners at the April 6th meeting. We acknowledge the Saturday opener of the 2019-2020 rifle deer season has been a controversial, and it did present challenges to some of our members who traveled to camp. But we've also heard stories from members who were excited to be able to hunt with their school and college-age kids, and some who, because of work priorities, were ecstatic to be able to hunt on opening day for the first time in many years. The Saturday opener gave them an extra day to hunt. The Saturday opener was especially important for those who only had the weekend to hunt. The Governor's Youth Council for Hunting, Fishing, and Conservation provided a statement, and it's included in my package that hopefully all of you have received. On the Saturday opener to the PGC, when they spoke on January 25th at the Game Commission meeting, I thought these paragraphs warranted highlighting. Most post-secondary institutions end the Thanksgiving break on the following Monday, further eliminating opportunities for college kids to go hunting. Remember, too, that for students who travel great distances to return to college, Saturday is likely the only full day for hunting available on the one weekend that they have off. In 1963, the Game Commission moved the opener from December 3rd to the Monday after Thanksgiving. Traditionalists, though ruffled at first, quickly evolved to accommodate this advantageous change. Old traditions seamlessly meld into new ones with time. Starting the season on Saturday will allow people of all ages, occupations, and backgrounds to participate in making timeless hunting memories. That testimony was given by Miss Emma Olney, who's the president of the Governor's Youth Council for Hunting, Fishing, and Conservation. While representing PFSC at the NRA Great American Outdoor Show earlier this month, I performed a very unscientific, one-day ad hoc poll regarding the Saturday rifle opener. I asked attendees passing by my booth if they were Pennsylvania deer hunters. If the answer was yes, I asked, Saturday opener, yes, no, or undecided. I had 108 people that I surveyed. 75 people supported the Saturday opener, 22 people opposed, and 11 responded as undecided. I've also conducted an all-access Facebook poll. We had more than 1,000 respondents, and 65% of those were in support of the Saturday opener. Regardless of the final results of these polls and the official position that we will ultimately take, the Federation is adamant that the opening day and length of all seasons are wildlife management regulatory issues dealing with seasons and bag limits. Thus, they are decisions that we believe are and should remain under the regulatory authority of the subject matter experts, the Pennsylvania Game Commission. We will oppose any legislative attempts to mandate wildlife management decisions via legislation. And I did a recent poll about that question, and with over 700 respondents, 92% indicated they did not want a legislative answer to this issue. They would rather have it be decided by the Game Commission. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is entrusted with the management of the state's nearly 500 species of wildlife. This includes the 67 species that we hunt. The ability to set seasons and bag limits is a crucial part of the management process. The Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsmen and Conservationists supports the science-based and led resource-first model and the process of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Any other system or interference threatens the management of Pennsylvania's wild birds, wild mammals, and their habitats for current and future generations. Recent changes in long-standing management practices, while sometimes hard to accept at first, allow for maximum opportunity for Pennsylvania hunters, and have led to an increase in license sales this year. Increases in license sales mean more overall Pittman-Robertson funding coming to Pennsylvania. It also means more general revenue from licenses. Both sources translate into more funds for the Commission to use for habitat and species projects and R3, recruiting, retention, and reactivation initiatives across the state. The Commission's regulatory authority, while we may not always agree with every decision the Commission makes, it is our opinion that the current Board of Commissioners does a great job overall of managing Pennsylvania's wildlife using a science-based, resource-first decision-making process. A prime example took place during the recent January public comment session, where an individual spoke about the history of raccoon hunting season. He expressed his concern that years ago, the raccoon season started October 1st. And then as raccoon pelts became more valuable, more people were trapping, more people were hunting them, the Game Commission took action to reduce that season, to shrink the season. And he asked the question, now that not many people are trapping, not many people are hunting raccoons, how come that season didn't expand? It was very interesting to me to hear that, and then later on in the meeting, one of the commissioners brought that up and said, I think that was something we ought to have the staff look at. And that was a good example to how they are hearing the public and making decisions, but they are considering the resource first. As older hunters age out of the license buying system, the Commission must be able to utilize new ideas to keep the next generation of hunters engaged. The Federation's Board of Directors understands that some of these changes may not always make everyone happy and may sometimes shake things up and cause us to try new traditions. We understand there will be times it won't always be about what's best for me, but instead, what's best for the resource and the overall best interest for the continuation of our outdoor heritage. Based on current feedback and the increase in license sales, specifically the sales referenced on the day before the opener, we believe this may be one of those times. I thank you again for this opportunity. I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Federation and as a conservation community, united behind the commitment to provide science-based and led wildlife management for the benefit of all Pennsylvania wildlife citizens, and visitors. I thank you for your time to have me out here, bud. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daub. And again, we're going to save questions for the end here. So, like I said before, don't go too far. At this time, I'd like to introduce Brian Burns, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, to come on up.
Chairman Courts, committee members, my name is Brian Burhans, Executive Director for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I would like to invite to provide our testimony. We're managed or governed by an 8-member board of directors who set policy for the agency. So I'd like to introduce Commissioner Denny Fredericks, who will provide our testimony.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, Chairman Gillespie, or thank you, Chairman Gillespie, for calling the meeting. I'm sorry you couldn't be here. Chairman Courts, members of the House Game and Fisheries Committee, my name is Dennis Fredericks, and I am the Commissioner for District 2, which encompasses Allegheny, Armstrong, Beaver, Fayette, Greene, Indiana, Washington, and Westmoreland counties. On behalf of the entire Board of Commissioners and the agency, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you to talk about last year's decision to move the opening day of the rifle deer season to Saturday. It is important to remember that the Pennsylvania Game Commission exists to protect 480 species of wild birds and wild mammals and their habitats for current and future generations. The last part is especially important, and one aspect that I believe gets overlooked quite often. As your state wildlife conservation agency, we are tasked with managing for the present and the future. Additionally, it's important to note that by law, we are required to manage all of those species for everyone, hunters and non-hunters alike. As you know, the Pennsylvania Game Commission receives no general fund tax dollars. We rely on 3 major sources of funding: natural resource management, oil, gas, coal, timber, and Pittman-Robertson federal excise tax revenue from sporting goods and hunting and trapping license sales. The Pittman-Robertson funds are intricately tied to license sales. Essentially, the more license we sell, the more federal funds we receive and are able to draw down and put toward any number of initiatives that benefit wildlife and hunting here in Pennsylvania. The license year begins July 1st and it runs through June 30th. While I cannot tell you the final license sales numbers will be on June 30th, I can tell you what they look like through January 31st. Our year-to-date sales of licenses have increased over the last year. This is significant. As of January 31st, general licenses sales have increased by 3,618 over the last year to date. On the surface, 3,618 additional hunters may not seem significant, but we can look at some other states for comparison. Through December 31st, New York was down 2%, Michigan was down 3%, Ohio was down 8%. So not only did we see an increase, we did so at a time when other big hunting states were losing licensed buyers. Nationally, hunting license sales have been on a decline for decades. In Pennsylvania, hunting license sales peaked in the very early 80s and have generally been declining since. There have been a few small increases along the way, but for the most part, they are declining. Countless surveys and research projects have been done, not only in Pennsylvania, but nationally, to determine the cause of this decline. Through all this work, overwhelmingly, the number one reason that people do not purchase a license is lack of time. The logical remedy for this would be to create additional opportunities for hunters and trappers. However, it is important to balance the needs of the resource with hunting opportunities. With that in mind, finding additional opportunities for hunters to take a field is very difficult and limited. We have to be strategic about those additional opportunities. Just randomly throwing extra days on the end of the season or adding some obscure extra season are not likely to work. We have to take advantage of what we know regarding hunter tendencies, buying behaviors, and make the best decision we can with that information. For example, we know that the average age of a deer hunter in Pennsylvania is 54 years old. That's troubling. In just a few years, those hunters are going to age out of the yearly license buyer and into the lifetime license class, of which, of course, they don't pay. We have to find a way to get and keep the younger generation involved. We know that we lose a considerable number of license buyers from the age of 18 to 30. It makes sense. Kids hunt with parents consistently through the time they graduate from high school. At that point, they are off to college, trade schools, military, workforce, you name it. They're starting their lives as adults. First jobs, starting families, buying houses, their time is exceptionally limited. They are dealing with being lowest on the seniority list for time off, if they even have vacation days to take. They are dealing with getting back to school for class and finals. They don't want to have to make that difficult decision in a lot of cases. It's made for them. Randomly throwing another week of rifle deer season isn't going to help those folks. We know that we are losing hunters to other states, and it's not because they have better hunting. Make no mistake, Pennsylvania has world-class hunting, whether you're pursuing deer, bear, turkey, elk, or a myriad of other species. We know we're losing them because of opportunities to hunt based on, again, time available. We have heard from PA residents that are going to New York and Ohio because they are able to hunt the whole weekend. Likewise, we hear from hunters in other states that would love to come hunt Pennsylvania if they were able to hunt the entire weekend. We also know that we have a very limited number of huntable days that will help fill this void. We've heard the point made regarding the survey that was done a couple of years ago, which showed that hunters preferred the opening day to be on Monday. The issue with the survey was in the questioning. It was like asking whether you preferred steak or lobster. I may prefer lobster, but I also like steak. I can tell you that the response that we have seen in regard to the Saturday opener has been overwhelmingly positive. We have heard countless stories of how college students were able to hunt with their families for the first time in years, reliving those traditions of years past. How former Pennsylvania residents were able to come back and hunt in the same area they did years ago. We've heard about the parents with young families that had the opportunity to not only hunt with their children, but have precious additional time with them. Yes, we have heard some traditions being impacted, but we have also heard the incredible stories of new traditions that have been started. I'm sure that at some point you have heard someone say that the Game Commission just wants to get rid of hunters altogether, or the other conspiracy theory you may hear is that we just want to eradicate deer. I am telling you that cannot be further from the truth. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is filled with passionate, lifelong hunters who continue to work in the best interest of all citizens of this great Commonwealth. The truth of the matter is that the future of conservation in Pennsylvania relies on hunters and trappers continuing to participate. We have to be open to ideas that will buck the trend of declining license sales. Time will tell if this was the right move, but in a vacuum, it appears that moving to a Saturday opener has moved the needle in a positive direction with respect to hunter participation, and that is a godsend for conservation in general. Thank you again for the opportunity to come here today, and I would be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fredericks. At this time, we're going to take questions. So those folks that spoke before, stand by. First, I'm going to go to Representative Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How you like that?
Not bad for a freshman.
Not so sure that's a super honor today, but thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I do have a series of questions. No doubt will have to be answered by individuals. But Mr. Frederick, since you're sitting there, I have to tell you, from hearing a plethora of different numbers today and frankly, probably more research on license sales from the first testifier that I've ever heard. They're your numbers, though, right? He got them from the Game Commission, right? Brian's shaking his head. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy. Here, take a couple digits here or there, maybe, but I think what troubles me in a general sense is you do, as others have done in the past, use the responsibility of the Game Commission to the 480 species. But I will also remind you that in Title 34, quite frankly, this room is also filled, no doubt, with sportsmen, which is what the commission is in priority to serve. And quite frankly, it's the sportsmen who purchase the licenses. So we know you have a duty, as many of us enjoy many non-game animals also. But I will always like to remind you that that is to be your number one priority, even as you stated with the money. So having said that, going back some years, since I do happen to have quite a bit of history as a hunter and sportsman, trapper, and whatnot, there has always been a question about the product and what is being managed and how it's being managed. I often bring up our state bird, and many times it's blamed on West Nile virus. And quite frankly, every national organization that I have rubbed shoulders with have said it's about habitat. And so for me, when we're just here today, mostly on the Saturday opener, you did reference things like steak and lobster, which I'm not so sure that applies. But nevertheless, that's your analogy, and that's okay. I'm gonna share, or I'll ask you this question. Do you believe that when you say it was overwhelmingly positive, that the upheaval that was created even within the ranks of the commissioners was positive?
Are you asking me, was the juice worth the squeeze?
No, I'm asking you what I just asked you. I'm asking you, was that positive according to your testimony?
I'm not sure.
About the commissioner that resigned over this subject we're talking about today.
I feel very comfortable in telling you, I've been at this game a long time, as you have. I served as commissioner under Governor Ridge in '91. I'm serving my second term. I've seen a lot of controversial issues come and go. Among our current board, I can look you dead in the eye and tell you that was a very hard, courageous decision for each one of them to make. And honestly, some of the commissioners didn't know what their vote was going to be until the very last second. As far as the upheaval you described, the only upheaval there was you had 7 board members, of which the Saturday opener wasn't even on their radar at all, including me. And then you had one commissioner that thought that might be a good idea, and he brought it up in the name of the children because he's a lifelong hunter education instructor, and it's the reason he brought it up. When he started to see the negativism coming in, which we all did, but frankly, Chairman Gillespie and Chairman Courts called us in, and we told them the truth. We did our due diligence, and we all went home to our respective districts. And I talked to sportsmen's clubs and conservation leagues and high school students, college students. I have a camp in Potter County. I traveled all over Potter County, did not identify myself. I did not tell them who I was. Talked to business owners, motel owners, hunters in the woods. And I have to say, Representative Maloney, that the vast majority of comment that I got back was apathy. Most of the comment was apathetic. It doesn't matter to me. I'm a hunter. Open deer season on a Wednesday. I'll find a way to get there. And I understand that you need to do this for the young people, and I don't like it. I don't like it.
Well,
but I want to be clear that there was no disruption or upheaval among the board, other than Commissioner Daley leaving under these conditions.
Well, that's upheaval. I mean, he is the individual that you refer to as the man who proposed this.
Yes.
And after he saw what the outcry was, he was so strongly against it that when that vote took place, he couldn't bear it and left.
Obviously.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be the reason
so I
you would
think I
leave.
had to explain that because I'm not so sure that maybe we have the same definition for upheaval. And since you served several times, and thank you for that, you would no doubt remember that there are commissioners who bucked the board on just deer management.
Sure.
And so there has been some things that have taken place with respect to what you would do and the decisions that you would make. I would also tell you that even your own, I think what bothers me is when we hear these numbers, and even out of you twice, was the fact that hunters in their numbers didn't want this. 61%, 81%, whatever that was. And I know a commissioner back home in a private meeting used the 65 figure. I said, sir, in our world, that's a landslide, even if you don't use the 81%. And he said, well, I would agree. And so I guess just steering this to you, I guess my question really would be in my mind about how we make those decisions, and maybe we find out that they shouldn't have been. And even to say to have a full weekend, I think the testifier before brought out the point that you could have that full weekend very easily with the Sunday the very following weekend. So it's an option. I mean, is it something that you could change?
Sure.
Something that you could go forward. And not to leave out the others with respect to this, but I had a text message sent to me from somebody that you all know, and I know you all know him. And I would just like to tell you that this individual was so taken back by the decision that what he texted me was, I now just lost my opportunity to hunt the opening day. It's Thanksgiving weekend. Quote, people are going to get divorced over this. That's how serious this individual took this. And I assure you, Probably everybody in this room knows who that is. And I would never identify somebody, but that's a text message that came to me almost immediately after you folks made the vote. So it is a serious matter. I mean,
Pennsylvanians are serious hunters.
correct. And we also, and some of us serve on the tourism committee. And tourism is the second biggest industry in Pennsylvania, which a lot of people don't understand that. And the tourism piece to this is also intertwined with tradition. So just from an objective point of view, looking back, and I've often told many people that I like to use my hunting and background as experience, but I try to separate myself as a legislator as to the voice of the people, and which I will say rather sharply again to Mr. Dobb. If you think taking the voice of the legislature, which is the people, out of this democratic process, then you might as well go to a communist country. We are the voice. And it insults me, it insults the sportsmen, and it insults everybody who goes to their representative about an issue on a board that is Senate confirmed. I don't know what you don't understand about that. You must go to the Senate to be confirmed like that gentleman is. That's the legislature. It's insulting to continuously hear that we should not be in this process.
May I add something
Sure.
for 1 second? You mentioned tourism, and I know that Representative Cook is very interested in Pennsylvania tourism. And you know the increase in license sales that we have, although they're very preliminary and we're not to the end of the year yet, a substantial portion of those license increase were non-residents.
I saw that.
And for now, it looks like people came home for Thanksgiving and were able to purchase a license and hunt on Saturday.
I saw that, and I don't even want to try to dissect that. I really don't.
I'm not prepared either.
But my defense of Pennsylvania in that respect would be Pennsylvania comes first. And I've always felt that a Pennsylvania resident should come first, no matter what the issue is. I don't care if it's a tag or what it is. To me, Pennsylvania sportsmen come first.
I respect that, sir.
And I think you would get that overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
So that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Maloney. Representative Cook.
We do, excuse me, we do, as representatives, serve we the people. Just a straw poll in the crowd. Pro Saturday. Move it back to Monday.
Wow.
Thank you. None? We don't do. Again, you know, the sportsman, you're in a very, very, very concentrated sportsman area. I mean, what's the position going forward? I mean, do we have a position from the commission?
Yeah, our position is as we promised to Chairman Gillespie and Chairman Quartz. We're in the middle of a comment period for seasons and bag limits for 2020. So we'll continue to take public comment. I have to turn my phone off because it's burning up on my side all day. I mean, my emails are off the chart, and we're hearing from both sides and all entities. So we are in the middle of a comment period. We promised both chairmen that we would review the results and make plans for next year. And I would encourage you all as representatives to please have your constituents let us know how they feel. And I would encourage you as representatives to let us know, let the agency know, let Josh Zimmerman, our legislative liaison, let us know.
Randy, would you like to?
Well, we did this last spring. You know, the sportsman spoke out in surveys and contacts to the agency. But addressing something, you know, when we talk about, and I know Commissioner Fredericks, you're serving on the council with him, 7 commissioners were blindsided.
Andy,
Mr. Shane, can you come up to the mic, please?
Right, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, just put a couple seats in.
Thank you.
Why don't you pull a couple seats up there?
Yeah, come on.
Dennis, pull some seats up.
Mr. Dobb, why don't you pop up here too, if you don't mind?
Come on up, Harold. Let's work this out. You know, Denny mentioned that 7 commissioners were blindsided. There's a reason for that. No one ever wanted this. No one ever talked about this. In my 60 years in this state as a resident hunter, serving on the Governor's Council and sporting unified sportsmen across the state of PA, the next person that asked me that they were concerned about changing the opener will be the first, before Jim Daly brought it up last year. This was a non-issue. And that's why, you know, I understand people will talk about changing a tradition, but if we're going to talk about the facts here, I think we have to talk about the truth. When we talk about the college-age kids, and Brian Burhans can validate this, Dr. Jagno came back. She surveyed 18 to 25-year-old hunters, student hunters. The survey came back, she gave them 4 days to choose from. The Monday, the Saturday before, the Friday after Thanksgiving, and the Saturday before that. The majority from the group that she polled said they still wanted the Monday opener. There we heard it, right from the college kids. And she went on to say that in conversations with this group, they said that they would miss class over a lot less reasons than the opening day of deer season. That was the surveyed science that was presented back to the board. So we keep running circles around what is and what isn't. We talk about the time factor. I heard that mentioned. Again, Dr. Jagner did a 19-point survey of reasons why hunters lapsed. This is what put Jim Daly on his heels on this. When those points came back, they were separated by a few tenths of a point. They were so evenly distributed, they were statistically indistinguishable between a couple of the items. And she finished her presentation saying that hunters lapsed for a multitude of reasons. Time was certainly not a major factor. So lapsing hunters and trying to create this fictitious time, we put the Saturday in with an attempt to create some time. And I heard it also testified about creating this time for younger professionals and people just coming out of school and starting jobs, don't have vacation. You sold 12 licenses this year in the 22 to 34-year-old age group. Now, that might change by the end of the year, but up until my data, till the end of December that I have from the agency, 12 licenses. So how much impact did this have? So how much concern was there from these quote-unquote younger individuals that couldn't get off to go Monday? You'd think there'd have been a rush of license sales because now, gee, I can go Saturday. Didn't happen.
So are you saying priority is probably what's the issue?
Tradition, priority, the time factor within this weekend. And I don't begrudge the agency for trying something. I get that. And Jim Daly, God bless him, he floated something out here that blew up in his face, and I give him a lot of credit. He's to this day, he's working now to put this Monday opener back. That's a professional opinion. He's a good man. But what we saw happen here, and when you come back with license sales today that they're up, and I think I pointed out prior that one category of the senior combo, if you yank that out, which had nothing to do with that, the license sales are in the red. So we didn't really go up. And as you see the bar chart I showed you, the 3 years on cyclic, it almost looks like you made it up. The license sales has bounced back for no apparent reason after 3 years of consecutive significant losses. So the license sales, to say that we brought, the Saturday opener brought some license sales in, certainly, a portion. But I think the elephant in the room here is at what cost?
So are you saying, sir, just so everybody can understand this, are you saying that total license increases on multiple, I'll say, opportunity expansions is the bigger number that we're seeing compared to the subject we're discussing today?
The bigger number that we saw that is trying to be claimed, or, like I saw the press release from the agency, license sales up after Saturday opener. Now, if you read that, what do you think? But the ultimate truth is you don't really know where license sales come in every year, and I think that bar graph shows you that. So when you take that into consideration, that you can't lay your finger on it, but certainly you can see some impact from the Saturday opener. Anything you do new, you get an interest.
I guess it's also hard to say that you lost turkey hunters and small game on that day.
We neglected to say that. That was a popular small game day for small game and turkey hunters that Saturday, which was taken away. The dynamic of this continues to grow. We could slice this thing into this layer, this onion will keep unfolding. But when you look at the big picture here, let's talk about license sales honestly. We didn't do much. And if you're on tourism committees and so forth, and if you read Senator Hutchinson's letter, what it did in his district and so forth, we may have brought a couple thousand hunters back with this through, the younger guy, people, maybe. We can't even say for sure how many of them weren't interested in the new bear season. Because if you look at the week prior, and I don't know if you know how this happened, some legislators, we introduced a concurrent bear and buck season the first week of the buck season this year, which is highly successful. Many hunters sat there, well, man, I've seen bear hunting opening week many times. I'm going to get my license here and just go buck hunting. I might luck into a bear. These types of things stimulated interest, as did the elk tag, as did the early muzzleloader season. Some of these stores that I surveyed said they sold a lot of muzzleloaders over this prior to the season. But the overall opinion of everybody that I've been circulating with and all of these businesses, if you read these letters that I sent to all of the legislators' offices, these businesses said that most of the hunters that came into their store did not like this. Now, who do we use for a barometer? I don't know what better one. And so subsequently, I understand there was an effort here to try to do something, but was this worth selling an extra 1,000 or 2 licenses? I just find a hard time understanding this, because you make the argument that I came in and got to hunt with my college-age son or daughter this year. I can counter that with how many kids that went to camp this year that lost people that come to their camp and their tradition was killed over this. Because a lot of guys couldn't get there. When they did get there, they were too rushed. They didn't have time to partake in scouting out in the woods, putting their tree stands up. This is hunting. This is what it's all about. It's not all about filling the tags, as Commissioner Kinnick said in a recent broadcast. We're doing everything we can to fill hunters' tags. That's not the entirety of what hunting's about in Pennsylvania. And I'll just gone on too long. Let me say one more thing. What concerns me is, I don't know if the legislators are heard, but there was a proposal this year to allow hunters to shoot as many deer as they have tags without tagging the first deer. Think about that for a minute. A hunter can sit in a tree stand with 3 or 4 tags. Here comes some deer. He's got his Remington pump rifle. He can start blasting away, killing 2, 3, 4 deer, as many as 6 if he could get lucky enough to hit them or wound them. How do you propose something like that? What happened to fair chase and ethics and all that? So the mindset, I just am having a trouble with what we've done here. We've thrown tradition to the wolves. We've thrown the small businesses that were hurt from this, thousands of them, to the wolves. We sold a few thousand licenses maybe. That's the summary of the whole thing.
May I respond?
Sure, absolutely.
With all due respect to Mr. Santucci's comments, I disagree with some of them, and I agree with him on some of them. We have absolutely not forgotten the traditions. The entire staff and the entire board of at the Game Commission has been forced into taking the mindset that traditions are to be celebrated, not forgotten. And we're working on ways to do that. That's number one. Number two, everybody keeps talking about this minuscule increase in license sales of 3.7%. In the business world, when you're on a glide path of 3 and 4% loss for many, many years, and all of a sudden you realize a 0.3% increase, that's a net 4% gain. So that's huge.
For clarity on that, what is that percentage of? What number?
I don't know, and doesn't matter at this point.
I just mean
hunters. That's general hunting license. That's 3,000 more hunters that bought hunting licenses this year than last year, and we are second only to Texas, and everybody else around us is fallen by the wayside. Now, is this solution permanent? Is it liquid? Can we modify it? Certainly. Yes, We can work with you, and we're willing to work with you. Let's see what the numbers really are. This is early in the game, but there's no doubt in my mind and no doubt in the staff's mind that what this did was move the needle in a positive direction. Can we move the needle further by going to Monday, back to Monday? And I don't know, but we're fulfilling our promise to.
Let me ask you a
Representative
question
Courts.
on that, because you bring up a good point. So if a proposal was made to go back to Monday, and what you're talking about with concurrent seasons, and you allow it to go through Saturday and Sunday into the next weekend and on beyond until it ends in 2 weeks, do you think that could be a compromise to the end result?
It could be. It could be. Again, we're in the middle of comment period. And
I think there is something very serious to consider, and I think tradition isn't just hunting tradition. I think it's in light of the text message that I got, where people are following Black Friday, they're following Thanksgiving, they're following Small Business Saturday, they're following all those things that do keep our lives busy in tradition and family.
Now, Representative Maloney, I know you're an avid hunter. I know you are. Would you miss a hunting day for Black Friday shopping?
I'm the exception to the rule. That's why I take myself out of it.
And then I can't tell you, literally hundreds of letters. How dare you?
I did not. My priority was, when it was time to go, I made it happen.
Right.
Even with every one of my children. Okay?
Right.
So I made that happen. If I had to take them out of school, they got the letter, they got the note.
Right.
So I made it happen. I realized that some people won't be that passionate.
Right.
But you asked me personally, and I'm telling you, I made it happen.
Right. Yeah, that's
If I-
what happened. The other exception that I want to take to Mr. Santucci's remarks, the Board of Commissioners were not blindsided at all. Blindsided to us on the board means that one of our board members brings up an item under new business without any prior discussion with staff and has a second lined up to put it on the floor for discussion. That's blindsided. We were not blindsided. This followed procedure to the T.
I think you did say earlier, though, that it was a surprise, or I'm not sure exactly what adjective you used about when Mr. Daly proposed, and then
The adjective I used, that the other 7 of us, this Saturday opener issue was not even on our radar.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
So that was sort of the blindsiding I think he's referring to.
He brought it up, he got a second. Okay. And to be team players, we voted to have it thrown out and run up the flagpole.
Understood.
I think my concern, Denny, was when you look at the Commissioner's Policy Manual, they're remanded to take in the hunter opinion is one of the constituent hunter opinion. That was strongly on opposition here. It was completely ignored. They're also remanded to take in their staff reports. The staff reports who shot down and the commissioners had some hypotheticals, time, what to bring back lapsed hunters, and it was all refuted. And it was to a point where I watched the meeting. It was a live stream meeting. They brought in Derek Stoner. He's their hunter outreach coordinator. He's the guy they pay to know the demographic of the hunters in this state. And Derek came right in and he followed up and supported Dr. Jagno. We're not going to likely not influence younger hunters. You're going to, whatever perceived was the word he used, whatever perceived benefit you think you're going to get from the Saturday openers, you're going to be offset by camp hunters, conflicting openers in other states. So there was no support from staff. There was no support from the hunters. If I remember right, the two chairmen of this very committee called that Board of Commissioners back to reconsider the vote. Am I right, Mr. Court? I was going to talk about that. Okay. And now here we are today, because this was to be revisited. That's what I believe the comment that was used. Now, I get we have this uptake, but I think I showed clearly that one category puts us in the red. And you just, and the point that bothers me the most is with the success of everything that I mentioned, with the bear, with the, and so forth, almost 60,000 different new specialty tags purchased this year because of changes. How do you lay this at the feet of just the one? You know, if your car's missing and you change the plugs, the wires, the points, and it quits and it runs right, how do you know which one fixed it? You know, so we have some data to show about license sales purchased the week before, but the argument can also be put into that. There was a lot of interest about the bear season that opened at the same time. So it's a double-edged sword. So I guess this, when you cut to the chase, was what we gained worth what we lost? I really think it gets to that.
Great.
May I add one thing?
Sure.
The problem here isn't the opening day of deer season and when it occurs. The problem here is Thanksgiving.
That's a good point. That's a big part of it.
That's you can't
Put that on the next agenda.
you can't move that. If we move it ahead or we move it back, you know, we're still going to have a different set of issues.
Sure.
To a degree. Excuse me. I agree with Denny to a point on that, but you also have to understand having a weekend ahead of the Monday. See, if you know what I'm saying, if you started on a Saturday, any Saturday, regardless if Thanksgiving was there, guys are still coming off of work Friday. See, the time is still not there to jump in, especially with 200,000 guys likely to still hunt from camps. You know, so whatever Saturday you started on, you lost this buffer of Saturday, Sunday preparation times, opening up, warming up camp, shooting in your rifle. That was the tradition and the aspect that we lost. So I agree with Denny. It would be less complicated if we didn't have it on a Thanksgiving weekend, but it would still present the problem that guys would have to get off work at Friday and get to camp. Otherwise, they're going to have to take off work Friday. You know, it's still, this weekend was the buffer for the Monday.
Great. Let's, excuse me, let's move along to our Representative Kulik.
Well, a lot of my questions have been answered. I have a very suburban district. In fact, it's a totally suburban district, but I have hundreds and hundreds of sportsmen, sportswomen, and hunters in my district. So this is a very important issue to them. I appreciate everyone coming here and giving their testimony, but I will have to add that I was very impressed with the data and the numbers presented by Mr. Santucci. I think a lot of those hit home. I think you did your homework and answered so many questions I would have had to say, well, if we're up 3,618 licenses, where did those come from? And I think you answered that question as to where they came from. And I appreciate that. And as I said, most of my questions have been answered. I will add, though, that several months ago, I did reach out to my constituents and said on the Sunday hunting issue and the Saturday change that they should contact the Gaming Commission. And we gave them the ability to do that. We sent out the site for them to contact because I thought that was important, and I was specifically told by your staff that this is what they needed to do. And I'm hoping that a lot of them, in fact, did that. And we did this months ago out of my office. But I appreciate the testimony again. I think the data and the numbers say a lot that were presented today.
Thank you, Representative Kulik. Could Representative Gleim?
Hi, thank you. I have an observation and just maybe a comment. On this graph right here that you provided, it was number 3.
Correct.
I just want to make a general observation that I think this is the problem, not Thanksgiving. Okay? This is the problem. And just observing some of the upticks on here, just go back to 1998, we had a stock market crash then. In 2001, there's an uptick. That was 9/11. In 2008, 2009, during the uptick, that was our economic downturn. I mean, you can almost see why we had the upticks here. And in 2013, coming from the construction industry, where a lot of our men and women hunt, that was a bad construction year. But if you take a look at this comprehensively and don't even consider those reasons why we have the upticks, it's going down over time. So my question is, from the Game Commission standpoint, you're looking at this data. Did you do any type of a comprehensive impact study on why this may be happening and all of the things that you could be doing to enhance it? And I mean, some of the things that came up were putting hunter safety courses in schools, the Sunday hunting, the Saturday opener, social media campaigns. And I would say that the percentage increase is not significant if you don't factor in the opportunity cost of all of the other things that didn't happen during that week. And so what I'm asking for is maybe having some forethought to this rather than just shooting from the hip. Hey, let's just throw out a Saturday opener and see if that gives us a little bit of an uptick. And maybe because I'm new, I didn't get any type of impact study on this, but I would suggest before we make any other decision from here, doing something more comprehensive based off of some of the data that we just received.
Madam Representative, the purpose of me being here was to give you an opportunity to speak directly to me, the final decision maker and one of the voters. But your questions are very, very good. And I would appreciate if you would give our Executive Director, Brian Burhans, a moment to explain some of the things you just asked, if you don't mind.
Yeah, to go back, I mean, you're right, that graph that declined since 1983, that's the real big issue. I think when we look at this, I look at, if we want to look at from the economic, from the business side, and the outdoor industry has been hurting for some time now. There's a lot of turnover nationwide in the outdoor industry as we see this national decline of hunters. And as the agency, when we looked at and examined different opportunities, to answer your one question, do we do other things other than, creating more opportunity? And absolutely, doing a number of things for everything from social media to out on the ground events and trying to get people involved in hunting. Why I think it's significant, and again, we could slice and dice this data all day long and make inferences. I would argue that, it was a positive. It wasn't in the red because although more people went into senior, I had other people younger people coming in and buying license behind them. So overall, we saw something that was positive. Is this the answer? It's only 1 year's of data. It's hard to make a prediction based on 1 year's of data what's going to happen, but at least it is a change. Of all the surveys we do, the two things that come up, and this is national and here in Pennsylvania, number one reason people don't hunt is time, and number two, it's a place to hunt. We're real fortunate in Pennsylvania. We do have a lot of places to hunt. And I would expect, especially down here in this part of Pennsylvania, that you would definitely hear from your constituents because we all recognize that there was impact to the camp culture. I'm a member of a camp. I've been a member of that camp culture during my life, and I understand the change that represented. But also we have to remember that 75% of our hunters don't hunt from camps. And those are a lot of times the people that we hear from that this really helped them because the kids were home from college or they had another day to hunt. And a lot of them, the way they looked at it and what they said to us was, well, you didn't take anything away from us. You gave us an extra day. Now, going back to the economics side of it, it's very difficult. When you look at it was brought up earlier you brought it up, about Dr. Jagnell and the predictions based on that. It's very difficult there's a lot of static, if you will, in data when you ask somebody, well, if we did this, would you did that? And we expect that. You can't always determine exactly what it is. So, for example, we asked one question, if we had Saturday opener, would you buy a license? And I won't give you the exact numbers, but there was a certain number that said, no, we won't. When we follow back up and say, did they actually not buy a license? A bunch of them did buy a license. So what they say they'll do, and we know this about surveys, what people say they want or say they do and what they actually do are often two different things. It gives us an idea. As far as an economic study, again, it's really hard to determine what is going to happen, because let's face it, it was mentioned earlier, we sent 27,000 extra bear hunters with a tag up to the north central area. That certainly had to have an impact economically on the area, in addition to all the other opportunities that we had. So although, granted, there could have been, because I've heard mixtures all over the board, I haven't seen a comprehensive study that was done, but except I got Clinton County, there was, I think it was, and I have it right here, 25% of them said, it didn't affect us, or it did affect us.
So
and
there was,
75
I just want to know, was there any type
No.
of thought process that led you to believe that opening on Saturday instead of Monday was the way to fix or to elevate this issue?
And again, that goes back to a commissioner decision, because it was a commissioner recommendation. So they brought the idea, and the reason was allowing more time. We know that kids from college are home during that spring or that break time. We know kids from high school have that weekend that's available to them. That's really a commissioner or a comment for Commissioner Fredericks. As far as an economic study, no.
Chairman Courts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony this evening. Greatly appreciated, very insightful. As I said earlier, it's a very passionate subject. I want to thank the members that attended here tonight also. Many of them drove long distance to be here, so thank you all for coming. I also want to thank the audience for being here this evening, and you participated in a survey earlier, and if my math was correct, and Representative Cook, it was a great question. Do you want to move the opener back to Monday? And just by glance, I thought I saw about 80% of the hands up. Is that about right? Would you concur with about 80% out of about 80 people? Well, there's 64, Mr. Fredericks. Where you at? There he is. There's 64 people right here, sir, that want to go back to that. But I'm going to do another survey at the end, but first I want to go through some of the history and share this with everybody, because Chairman Gillespie and I were deeply involved in this when it went down. When we heard about the Saturday start, I, for one, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, because I'm a traditional camp guy. And it cut right into how what we do at our camp, what I do. So, we had you guys in, and to your credit, 7 of the members showed up. Mr. Daly had resigned by that point in time. So you came in, honorable gentlemen, you came in, and we had a discussion about this, Chairman Gillespie and I, and got pretty interesting. Would you say, Dennis? It was an interesting conversation, to say the least. And one of the things that stuck out in my mind was Charlie Fox, the current president, right? He's the elder gentleman, the elder statesman, if you will. And when he spoke, I mean, he really brought some passion to that, because he's a traditional guy. And he only flipped on that last day. He was one of the flippers. And he did that because of the youth. He kept saying, it's because I want to get the youth involved in hunting. I want to create more opportunity for the youth. I understand that. I want more youth in hunting also, but I don't think we did it in the right way. That's just my opinion. But from that meeting, so everybody knows, all the members here and everybody in the audience, from that meeting, we've got a commitment from the 7 commissioners that they would revisit this in the next hunting season. Well, that's here now. So you're going to be taking this up, and you're going to be discussing this Saturday start versus a Monday start versus possibly a Sunday start, and you're going to vote on that in April. Is that correct, Dennis?
Currently, the proposal is for a Saturday start, and it's subject to public input between now and April.
Right, so you're going to take the public input. So I want everybody to send a letter to the Game Commission on how you feel about this Saturday start or Monday start, or maybe put idea out there for a Sunday start. But they did come in. They're honorable gentlemen. They did come in. They sat with us. They heard us out. And Chairman Gillespie was pretty adamant, and myself. And they are going to take that into consideration. They weren't going to just slam the door. They're taking our feedback again. Now, you took feedback last year, and you had 80% that said don't do it, but you did it anyways. So if you get 80% this year, Dennis, you'll be in the office again. You know that. So please take the message back to Charlie Fox and the whole group. If 80% of the people say they want to move this back, we need to consider that. And the problem is, and again, I'm a traditionalist, it is the Thanksgiving holiday. You have Thanksgiving holiday. You spend that time with your family and your kids. Then you have Friday, but your kids are still there and you're with your spouse and your family, right? Typically, you leave on Saturday. That was my deal, and that cut into that, okay? So we have an opportunity to change it. And now that we've voted yes for Senate Bill 147 and Sunday hunting is now law, we have the capability of possibly moving it to a Sunday, which is where I'm going with this. My question is this, and I'd like to run another survey of the group. If you can't get the Saturday moved back to Monday, who here would go along with the Sunday start? Raise your hand if you're for a Sunday. Okay, so a lot less folks, a lot less folks. Because I saw that as the great compromise. I saw that if you could have Saturday, you could still be with your family and do the other things and go to camp and help out the businesses that are being impacted, like Truman's store up in Jefferson County. Mr. Allen was here tonight, was bringing that up to me. And I know Senator Brewster is getting inundated with a lot of the other businesses up in rural PA. They're getting feedback slowly coming into us that it's really impacting them. And I appreciate, Randy, you bringing that to the table today and talking about that, because that's one of the things that was hidden out there, one of the unforeseen consequences. These people depend, their economic survivability in the wintertime is with that weekend of all the hunters rushing to camp. I was one of those guys going down to Greene County. I would hit all the stores and hit the businesses. Randy, if you want to mention anything about that again, you're welcome.
Yeah,
that's a big impact.
Absolutely. That was the part of this, I think, when I contacted the 10 businesses, and I picked big ones from Grice's, the largest one in the state, down to the mom and pop stores. And the thing that struck me the most is I didn't call 30 stores and cherry pick 10. The 10 I called, all, boom, they were already writing letters, some of them. So this was something that became very clear. This was a big problem. And they all identified, they discussed this with their neighboring businesses, same problems. You know, they said, boy, this was terrible. We lost one lady from, what's her name, Peggy from Kane, PA, Paul's Trading Post, I believe it was. If you read her letter, I mean, this struck me because she made the comment regarding, this is the first time in my life, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my gas bill this winter, because they depended on that $2,000 or $3,000 bump over that weekend, and they got about $90. And that, you know, the big stores are one, that's a big number, Grice, 200,000, but Grice will survive. But the other stores, the smaller places, the restaurants, the diners, the fire departments, all of those that lost from this. So when you look at the fact we only had a slight, now we talked about the youth. Charlie mentioned, you know, about the youth. And I mentioned earlier that the 4 youth categories were still down, total. One went up, the non-resident, a little bit, but the 3 out of the 4 went down, so the total was down. So our youth category still declined, and this was targeted for that 18 to 21, 18 to 34. Well, we told you what happened with the 22 to 34, 12 licenses, and you only sold 1,067 licenses to the 18 to 21s. So we reached a few people, you know, over last year, maybe a few more even on the makeup of last year's losses, but it just doesn't wash. You know, what we did to the traditions, I made a point, obviously, of researching this thoroughly. And I talked to a bunch of camp guys stopping in around my camp and all over. With God as my witness, I have yet to talk to one group of camp owners, and I brought some stuff with me even to show how, you know, we're cutting out, and I think Brian mentioned, 25% of our hunters are still hunt from camps and seasonal homes, approximately. So that's a quarter. You know, you're looking at 20, maybe 200,000, 240,000 hunters that you've drastically changed their tradition. But, Bill, you have a camp. You pay taxes. You do maintenance. You do have utilities. That money travels to those little tourism, those towns. Hunting is an intrastate tourism issue, big one. And we're just like deciding that we're going to be okay with selling a couple thousand licenses to the Game Commission, and we're going to throw all these businesses under the bus. I don't understand this at all. This is what's frustrating me as a sportsman, as a resident, that we're doing something here that's hurt a lot of people, millions of dollars in this state, thousands of businesses. If we'd have come back with a bunch of licenses sold in all these categories, guess what? I wouldn't be here tonight. But it didn't happen. So That's the problem.
That economic impact is huge, and I know that's starting to roll in here. I do want to relay something else. 2 miles from our camp in Greene County is another camp, and you probably have heard of this name, Rich Trumka. He's the president of the AFL-CIO International, and I go over there every year on Sunday. When I walked in his camp, he wanted to rip my head off. How dare you move this? I said, whoa, time out, Rich. I didn't move this. I was against the Saturday start. He was irate. I mean, just absolutely irate, because this is a big tradition down his camp with the 15 other guys. And he said how he had to leave the Thanksgiving table and he caused upheaval in his house. Oh, my gosh, I couldn't wait to get out of there because he wanted to rip my head off because I couldn't convince him that I didn't do this. Yeah. But I'm going to relay his side of it. He said this is going to cause divorces. Someone else said it here tonight. And that came straight from the president of the AFL-CIO, who is completely incensed over this Saturday start, as well as I am.
Bill,
I'll be quite honest with you.
I didn't get into the anecdotal stuff, which you're mentioning here, because I felt the case is stronger made on the license sales and the economic impact. The anecdotal side of this is enormous, but you can't sell that because it's not in hard numbers, and it's not in, how do you sell lost tradition? Or a commissioner that makes a comment that I haven't, not Mr. Fredericks, and I'll give him the courtesy because Denny was not one of the ones that made some of these comments, but I heard a comment from one commissioner say, I never heard any opposition about this in my area. This commissioner had a county in his area take a vote and put it in the paper that they opposed this change. I got 2 of the businesses that are in the packet are in the top 5 businesses in the Northeast, sporting goods stores, that were strongly against this and made comments that 90% were against it. That another comment was, I've never seen hunters angered so much about this. So here's a commissioner that says, I didn't hear any opposition. How did I find it? That's what bothers me. And we're going to take this back now again and put it in the hands of the same commissioners to assess this again after we just went through this mountain of evidence, and these businesses now are going to go. And if we put the Sunday on after the Saturday, more economic impact. So.
Right. Well, I know time's running late, and I just wanted to wrap up by saying, please, everyone, you heard today that they're taking comments, so make sure you get your comments to the Game Commission on where you stand with the Saturday start versus Monday start versus possibly a Sunday start, but send them the feedback, and I look forward to the vote. When is that, Dennis, so we can all attend? April 7th. So everybody, you're invited April 7th to come up and watch the vote. Right, Dennis? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Daub, I know you've been eager to say something.
It's actually a good segue. Thank you, Bill. I just wanted to let everybody know that as a witness, and Randy sat in the auditorium that day as well, if my numbers were correct, and maybe you have better numbers than me, but I believe there were 27 people spoke in person in the January Game Commission meeting, which is the process for this game management. And I believe out of the 27, around 20 or 21 voted in favor of the Saturday opener. And I was on the fence because my organization is undecided at this point. So, I recently ran the Facebook poll that was shared through many, many groups within Facebook. And I understand there may be some bias there thinking that it's only young people on Facebook. Well, I can tell you my 80-year-old mother before she passed was a Facebooker. So it's not just young people out there. So I'm not here to defend the Game Commission. I'm willing to fight when the fight is need to be taken to them. But when the commissioners sit there and listen to 21 out of 27 supporting the Saturday opener, we have to work the process. And that's the point that PFSC would like to make. We believe we have a good process here. So let's get out on April 7th, for or against, and do it. I'm not aware of any rally that was put out for or against for the January meeting. I think that was a pretty organic result, and it was pretty much 65 or 70% of the people thought Saturday was okay. So
I think, Harold, the problem there, when you see what's happened, is there's a gentleman sitting here today. He called me yesterday. Was it Jack? Right here. Where are you? And I never met him before. He just found out and he called me. And he made the comment to me, and you can reiterate if I'm telling the truth, that all the camps around him are against this, but a lot of them said, What are we going to do? They didn't listen to us last spring when they all came out and said no, and they didn't listen to us. Is that not true? So when you get 27 people come and you see my point, it's because the agency, they feel, didn't listen to them over this when we came out last year about this.
So you're sitting in front of the voice of the people.
Absolutely. I don't see that's, and again, I'll go back to if the license sales blew up and everybody loved this, and like I said, I wouldn't be here. But like I said, the hunters have resided to the fact that if I'm not mistaken, Denny Fillmore wrote an article in the Pennsylvania Outdoor News not too long ago calling out the Game Commission Board of Commissioners that they do not listen to the hunters. Am I not correct in that? You know, so the president of the federation even recognized, because this upset him too. You know, so
And I want to give a shout out to the commissioner that's sitting right behind you, because in my time here, only twice was I ever approached by a commissioner. Only twice. And tonight is the first time in my time that a commissioner actually sat on the panel and took questions. Okay? So let's give credit where credit's deserved, and I appreciate you said that, because he deserves that. And I believe that this is what this has come to. Because when we talk about the opportunity, when we talk about, Brian said, great opportunity in Pennsylvania, the one question I do have about that is that I've always taken pride in Pennsylvania having a lot of real estate. And to use the second problem as no place to hunt only brings me to another problem. Because if we do have a lot of place to hunt and they say they don't, that comes back to the product problem. So just food for thought for people to think about, and the fact that I have worked very hard on trying to get kids in front of the hunter's safety course, which has not been very well published. And so I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up again. So thank you again, Commissioner.
Thank you. Mr. Up.
I just want to reiterate again that we have to work the process. We can't be heard if we're not speaking. And I sense the frustration in the audience. Be heard. Make sure that you are getting represented, be it through an organization or go there as an individual. I remind everybody of the story I told. That was an individual raccoon hunter that stood up there and presented some information. And this board, I've been working with the Game Commission. I've been a hunter ed instructor for over 20 years, and I've been going to this meeting in Harrisburg probably since the 80s. I will say that this board that we have today is as cooperative and dedicated to bringing opportunity to Pennsylvania hunters as any that I've seen as a board since 1980. So, Representative Maloney, I have a hunter ed class this Saturday, and I'm really excited. There's 80 students registered in it. I used to have one school in Upper Dauphin County that allowed me to have a class in their school. And it was allowed because the principal was a certified hunter ed instructor. We need to find more than just the venue. We need to find the volunteer instructors as well.
Without a doubt, but I think the venue does help in the fact that I'll go a little bit further, and as a former school director, I know what policy does. And when policy blocks you from coming in,
Absolutely.
Remember, my legislation has to do with hunters, and the people who own those schools should have the opportunity to use them.
Yeah. Now,
So,
in my district,
that's a
as
good point.
as the hunter ed coordinator, I don't have a problem with venue. I do have a problem with time for students. And when the Millersburg School District had hunter education classes offered as a club for 1 hour for 6 weeks, every kid in Millersburg pretty much went through that. I got very few of them in my classes outside of that. So I'd love to work with you on your hunter ed idea. Love to sit down with you and talk about that.
I'd like to just end with one last thought, if I can.
Sure.
What concerns me a bit too is I, as a 48-year consecutive hunting license buyer, as a lot of guys probably in this room are, the concern being put on the hunter that could not see it clear to, I purchased my license over the years. Now, Brian will know we disagreed on some deer management policies and different things over the years. No, not us. But I always bought my license supporting this agency. I have a problem with us doing so much to reach out for a hunter that sees no other reason to buy a license other than changing of 1 day. The seasons are so long, there's so many species, there's so much. You know, I would buy my license if I broke my leg and couldn't go the rest of the season. I'd buy my license. And to make this change, to throw under your traditional hunters, the guys that have been loyal to this agency for half a century, to be concerned about some hunters that can't see it fit to buy a license unless we change 1 day. That frustrates me and it bothers me. So my point is, let's go back. You know, like I mentioned earlier, we jumped over the dollars to get to the pennies here. I mean, if we can get this back to the Monday and then work with the Sundays after that, I think this would be wonderful. Thank you.
Great. And, you know, we've had, I think, a great, robust conversation, colorful conversation today, but cordial. And, you know, I think the Game Commission has its work cut out for it here. And, you know, and I just implore, you know, everyone in this room, everybody who watches this, everybody out there, you know, it's been said by everybody up here tonight, we can't advocate for things if we don't know what to advocate for. So even if you think your voice isn't being heard, it's certainly not a time to sit back and give up. So if you truly feel passionate about something, you need to let these folks know, whether it's you personally, your representative, your respective agencies or groups that support you. It's very important to let your voice be heard, and you've heard that from everybody here today. And you know, I want to thank our panel today. I want to thank everyone who was here and gave their testimony. And before we get going here, I want to turn it over to Representative Cook, who was gracious enough to organize this and welcome us to his district. And Representative Cook, why don't you see us on out?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Chairman Gillespie, who couldn't be with us tonight. He's ill. And our panel as well. Believe it or not, you have some really avid outdoorsmen on this board. You're talking to somebody who ran a trap line 10 miles when he was in high school. I didn't shoot my first deer until I was 40. It was always a family tradition. Not that I didn't have the shots. But look, this is about faith, family, and future. And I don't believe that people understand the passion that we have here, not only in the 49th, but in entire southwestern Pennsylvania. It's almost a religion. Thanksgiving, I can remember you went out and hunt small game all morning. You came in, you ate Thanksgiving dinner, you watched a football game. Then you had Friday. Saturday, you shot your gun in, you did the camp. Sunday, you went out and you did the scouting, and you were out in the woods on Monday. So, look, we represent you. You have to have your voice heard out there. And that's why we're here. This isn't about us. It's not about us as individuals. It's about you, the people. And we're trying to do the best possible job that we can. So I want to thank each and every one of you. Don't give up the fight. I had a gentleman turn around and leave today because he couldn't speak. Okay, unfortunately, that's not how the process works up here. But the process does not end here tonight. They need to hear from us. Was in advertising for many, many years, and I used to tell the clients, advertising works 50% of the time. I just can't tell you which 50%. So keep your comments, those emails, contact the commission. Everybody truly is trying to do the best job we can here, and we do care about it. And again, thanks to all the committee members. Appreciate it.